Hello everyone, and welcome to my Keystone presentation. I am presenting how time inequality affects human agency and capability. Let's start with an example. If we look at the minimum wage rate per hour in US dollars, on average across all US states, a US citizen's minimum wage rate per hour is $8.81. On the other hand, across all Philippine provinces, the average rate per hour is $0.85 US dollars. If we look at the amount of time a citizen needs to spend to pay for 1 hour of the other citizen's time, an American citizen working a minimum wage job only has to work 5.18 minutes to pay for 1 hour of Filipino time. They save 54.19 minutes, which they can use for other things. On the other hand, if a Filipino had to pay for 1 hour of American time, it would take them 10.33 hours. They would not save any time. In fact, we Filipinos have to pay 9.33 hours more. And on top of all that, according to the World Health Organization, these are the life expectancies for an American and Filipino citizen. Filipinos have around 10 less life years than an American. We have much less time. And even though we have less, we are still expected to pay more of our lives. This is time inequality. While inequality has been studied in monetary terms, and there have been attempts to include other dimensions of poverty, global justice pursuits aiming to eliminate poverty and increase human agency and capability have neglected the temporal dimension. Time is a ubiquitous and universal resource that can limit human agency, capability, and freedom. The lack of time, or the lack of control over one's time, constrains an individual's choices and how they can choose to develop and spend their life. According to Gooden and colleagues in their book, Discretionary Time, A New Measure of Freedom, the ability to make choices over how to spend one's time is called temporal autonomy. And acting out of necessity implies a lack of choice, or temporal autonomy. The time left over after having done what is strictly necessary in paid labor, unpaid household labor, and personal care is time over which people have autonomous control. This is called discretionary time. And the more discretionary time you have, the greater your temporal autonomy. With more discretionary time and greater temporal autonomy, you can pursue things like learn a new skill, do that thing you've always wanted to do, spend time with your family and friends, sleep, or just lay in the sun and read a good book. The lack of discretionary time restricts the activities people can do because they would have to prioritize only the necessary activities needed to survive. If your nose is always on the grindstone, how can you push boundaries and expand horizons? The lack of discretionary time for marginalized people in the world does not just impact them. It affects all of us, even the wealthy. This is because it hinders the self-actualization of human society as a whole. Unfortunately, temporal autonomy all over the world is not equal, particularly with globalization. Citizens from the global north can outsource menial tasks to citizens from the global south and spend less of their time to pay for it. With lower purchasing power in the global south, citizens from poorer countries have to spend more time to trade for income to afford global goods. Furthermore, even when the prices of global goods rise with inflation, the incomes of average citizens from different countries do not necessarily rise with it. National and state borders regulate this, and for the average individual, citizenship matters. Let me illustrate this with an example. I will use a popular global good, Netflix. If we look at the time cost per month of Netflix for a citizen from the global south and a citizen from the global north, and we look at how much time each citizen has to spend working minimum wage labor to afford a month of Netflix, this is what we will find. In the Philippines, Netflix costs approximately $11 a month with current foreign exchange rates. In the US, it's $15 a month. Based on minimum wage rates, it takes an American 1 to 2 hours of minimum wage labor to afford a month of Netflix, while for a Filipino, it would take approximately 11 hours. This makes a time difference of 9 to 10 hours per month. And you can do a lot of things in this time. Now, imagine this with groceries, clothes, and other global goods. And that's just trade. What about travel? Have you traveled to a country and thought it was so cheap? Well, let's look at the other side of that coin. If locals in that place travel to your country, they would think your country is expensive. For them to travel to your country, they literally have to spend more of their time in order to afford to travel to your country than you would need to afford to travel to their country. And notice how this is so contingent on citizenship. According to Huebner and his colleagues, many of these differing temporalities are determined by the predominant implementation of the nation-state model. This model of organizing the world draws boundaries between people using citizenship and nationality. These delineations dictate the laws, institutions, and privileges a person is governed by and has access to. Having a certain citizenship and nationality is largely beyond the influence of the average person because these aspects of identity are often determined by the lottery of birth. Although you can change citizenship during your life, this takes a lot of time. It often takes more than 5 years to acquire a U.S. citizenship and gain access to higher wages and purchasing power. And when a Filipino migrates to the U.S., their educational degrees and other credits are often unrecognized. The doctor becomes a nurse, the architect becomes a janitor, and the CEO becomes a caregiver. Despite the individual's lack of control in determining their citizenship at the beginning of their lives, citizenship plays a significant role in determining one's temporal autonomy and how we can choose to live. Your citizenship is what allows you to gain access to certain income and purchasing power levels. Citizens from the global south are barred from having the same privileges that citizens from the global north possess. I mean, there is a reason why there is an immigration problem. It is the same reason why I am trying to immigrate to Canada. People want better lives because in the countries they happened to be born in, their time is exploited by citizens on the other side of the world. We want to migrate to a place that grants us more purchasing power so that we can increase our liberty. The exploitation of our time is the exploitation of our lives. So maybe next time you buy something from Amazon, Alibaba, Wish, some drop-shipping e-commerce website, or pay for something ridiculously cheap because it was made in a poorer country, you might want to reconsider your decision, especially if you think of yourself to be a liberal and democratic individual that believes in justice, equality, and fairness for all. Unfortunately, there is not much literature on how the time-use decisions of citizens from the global north affect citizens from the global south and vice versa. While time-use research and feminist economics have emerged to reveal the economic contributions such as unpaid domestic labor that are typically performed by marginalized groups, much of the research only looks at people within the same country or community. The countries researchers study are mostly in the global north such as the US, Australia, and the UK. Because these countries have conducted nationwide time-use surveys, researchers are able to process the data and use it to produce knowledge. However, for countries in the global south, time-use data is severely lacking. Because this data is unavailable, researchers are less able to perform their work. This results in all of us not having an understanding of the temporal interactions of citizens from the global north and south. With our globalized economy and the liberal pursuit of eliminating poverty, increasing human agency and capability, including the temporal dimension, is essential. Understanding people's lives, choices, and the impact of these choices through the dimension of time is much more encompassing than the monetary dimension. This is because time is universal. Thus, it is necessary for us to look at the international division of temporal autonomy and how this impacts human agency and capability. To solve this gap in the literature, for my Keystone, I develop a research proposal that seeks to fill in time-use data gaps in the transnational context and further our understanding of the interactions of citizens from the global north and south so that we can lift up the marginalized and underprivileged people of the world. For this research proposal, I integrate various methods and models from previous authors in a 5-stage mixed methods factorial research design. I focus on call centers in the business process outsourcing industry within the relationship of the Philippines and the United States. I chose to study call centers because it is a sector where the temporalities of citizens from the global north and south directly influence each other. I locate my scope within the relationship of the Philippines and the US because they have a historical, colonial, and economic relationship in which I expect to see time inequality. I wish I could go in more depth about this, but unfortunately, that is all the time I am allowed for this Keystone presentation. I hope that this inspires those pursuing global social justice to include citizenship and the temporal dimension in the pursuit of universal human agency, capability, and autonomy. If you would like to hear the full version of this presentation, or read my Keystone paper that goes into more depth and nuance on this topic, you can contact Quest University or email me at chosen.canlas@questu.ca. Thank you for watching my Keystone presentation.